Hey, Composing Gloves here. I'm wearing a hat, and today we are starting the Learn Monarch or Monarch from the Ground Up series. Today we're going to be looking at what is Monarch. This is the introduction video to it, so we're going to get a brief overview of that, what I expect you to know, and what you're going to be learning in this series. Let's start with what you're going to be learning in this series. You're going to be learning how to make Monarch essentially bend to your desires. You'll gain sound design concepts, and you're going to learn what the knobs do, and you'll have some idea of why you're grabbing a particular knob, because you're going to want to do a certain thing, and you'll be like, oh, I can accomplish that thing with this knob. And so you'll have an idea of what you're doing when you're doing sound design with Monarch. You'll have a lot of general concepts understood as well. Because, for example, there are all sorts of interesting relationships that happen when we use the load knob, the feedback, the cutoff, and the filter envelope all together, and the resonance, of course. Honestly, like, these ones form a very particular relationship that you could play with all day long, but there are similar relationships among most of the knobs here. So even though it looks like a small deal, there's a lot going on. So you're going to be learning, basically, we're going to try and master Monarch. And we'll be looking at sound design. I'll give you an example of it in a track near the end of this series. And let's talk about what I expect you to know. I expect you to know basics of sound and synth basics, the series in my playlist. So if you are unfamiliar with what an oscillator is, what phase is, what an envelope is, all those things are covered in my sound and synth basics course. And it will also be a link in the description that will take you there in the recommended series. You may also find the mixing series, the critical listening series, and the digital audio basic series to be of use to you. But definitely have the information in sound and synth basics under wraps, like all good there, because I'm going to assume that you know what that stuff is. Another great resource is the Sound on Sound Synth Secrets. That's a really great resource. There's a bunch of articles on synthesis if you like to read. So that's another really great one that is just super helpful for sound design in general and understanding what we're trying to accomplish. Also gives you an appreciation of where we are today versus the way things used to be. Okay, so moving forward, let's take a look at what is Monarch. So anyways, that's what you're going to be learning. That's what I expect of you. Let's really quick just give a brief overview. And we're going to be covering all these things in more detail in future videos. So Monarch. Monarch is a mono synth, meaning it can only play one note at a time. It cannot play two notes. If you want to play two notes with Monarch, you need two Monarchs that are each playing separate notes. And so, okay, that's step one. You need Reactor to run it. When you open it up, there's two panels. There's an A panel and a B panel. You can also shrink it. And you also have your snapshots. They're called snapshots in Reactor. And let's go to 3.1. Okay, so my favorite presets are in the classic folder. These are just cool. These are just cool presets. The presets for this were done really well. So when I grab Monarch, I'm trying to emulate something that's pretty old. I don't grab Monarch to sound like super duper original. I'm grabbing it to grab a really organic sound that has a lot of movement in it, and it replicates a sound that's already been done. It's not a new sound. If I want to be original, I'll grab something like Harmer faster than I will Monarch. But I really love Monarch for its sound. So if we were to it's just so cool. It's got like a gust to it. That's just awesome. So I've turned my volume down too. So and if we were to like turn the decay down so basically what I'm saying is I will grab presets and shape them to the way I want rather than create sounds from scratch. But I do sounds from scratch all the time. Just it's a lot less often than I will use the presets here and shape the presets to what I want. So it's a little bit different of a workflow because of the nature of what it is I'm trying to accomplish usually when I'm grabbing a Monarch. Okay, so we've got that out of the way. Monarch, besides being a mono synth, is also, of course, trying to replicate an old analog synth, namely the Moog. They're trying to go for a Moog. They can't say that, though, because of legal reasons. At least I'm pretty sure they avoid it in their manual. But basically what happens is there's a lot of nonlinearities in an analog synth. Components heat up, components cool down, components break, components can be overdriven. They do different things underneath different circumstances. And so they really try to replicate all that here. And some of this behavior as well can be controlled here with, like, for example, leakage and drift amount. So Monarch begins life with 3 oscillators. These 3 oscillators generate your sound at the frequencies you desire. These ranges here range from low, meaning LFO basically, and then these are organ stops, but you can think of they're just octaves. So you have up an octave, up an octave, up an octave, so on and so forth. You notice the oscillator 2 and 3 give you these fine tune controls, so you can tune them a little more precisely if that's your desire. But as a part of an analog synth is these things are not, they're going to drift a little bit in pitch. They're going to not be super tight together like they will in a digital synth where everything's exactly the same. These ones vary. And you can change that though with the drift amount. So you can change this. So for example, that's what we have. Let's do this. So you notice it's just, we've taken away that quality of it. Now that may or may not be a good thing for what you want to do. It's a little easier to hear on a high note. So no drift. Here is some drift. So pretty cool. That is a characteristic sound. And I think it's a very important knob to know about here. The other one is leakage. So if we were to make a very transient sound, you hear that at the end. That's leakage coming from our oscillators. We can turn that off and it goes away. Now, this is something that I'll find myself coming in here and changing all the time. So it's constantly emitting a little bit of sound, and if you compress it, you can actually bring it up. So sometimes I'll come in here and turn it off just for that reason. These other ones, we're not going to delve into right now, but they allow you to adjust how Monarch interacts when you use various controls. So it begins live here. And after that, we can, once we generate our oscillators, right, and we set the waveforms that we want, you see we have triangle, and we have various pulse waves, and a saw wave, and all manner of stuff. And you see we actually have some different shapes in here. So you kind of want to be wise about how you use some of these things. And we could choose our octaves. We come over here to our mixer, and our mixer can be turned on and off. And we see here that we have a volume knob for our 3 oscillators. So we can turn those on and off here. And then we have a feedback, a load, which is basically, you can think of the load as really fancy distortion or saturation. And we also have our noise generator. So it's a noise generator and not an oscillator because it's not periodic in nature. It never repeats. So it's not an oscillation. So as a result, it's called noise. And we covered the types of noise. This switches between pink noise and white noise as shown by the thing down below. And this is very useful for a variety of reasons that we'll talk about later. We have our feedback. Our feedback, there's 2 types of feedback inside Monarch. There's A and B, and we'll talk about those a little bit later. But basically, after it comes out, your amp module, your filter amp, it will be fed back into itself through the feedback circuit. And it's more useful, I think, to understand what these things sound like and how they behave in conjunction with a few other parameters, because there's a relationship that gets set up, and it sounds like you could play with this relationship for a really long time. So if we were to like, just to demonstrate a little bit, I'm going to turn on the feedback, because this feedback loop will go through a delay, right? Because it's got to go to the end of the signal and then come back. Let's take the filter envelope up. So you see that is, we've already hit it. And as we keep going, it gets more and more severe. So you can see there's a powerful relationship here. So moving on, we have our noise. We'll talk about the noise a little bit later. We also have our modulation capabilities and our pitch bend. Our glide time allows us to affect how notes are interpreted. Because we can only play 1 note at a time, we have all these ways of telling it how to do that. And glide allows us to affect that. Panel B also has some abilities here, like we have some legato function and note priority settings and things of that nature. And then we have our filter envelope and our regular amp filter amp envelope. The amp envelope, you notice there's an ADS. Where's the R, the release? Well, it's controlled here. And having these on in various configurations changes how the release functions, and it's based on the decay knob. Over here we have our filter envelope. This controls the envelope of the filter cutoff. So how the filter cutoff turns up and down. For example, Harmless has a similar thing going on. So we have a couple different filter types, and we can also change the modulation on these and adjust them like so. Our contour will affect how the filter envelope is interpreted. And so that's just a general overview. I know I didn't give you too many examples, but that's because as we get more and more into things, it's just, there's no way I can cover all these topics and everything that they include in one video. It's difficult to do it in a series because there's so much, and a lot of it requires personal experimentation. So I highly encourage you to just tweak stuff and see what it sounds like. But we're going to get into this. So if you have any questions, let me know. Subscribe. Support me on Patreon. It allows me to continue to make content. And have a blessed day.